Chelsea Hernandez is a Mexican-American filmmaker based in Austin, Texas. Her documentary, Building the American Dream, delves into the injustices in the construction industry in Texas, where, according to Remzekla, it is estimated that around half of the state's 1 million construction workers are undocumented. Building the American Dream is Chelsea's first directorial debut, and she joins me here on Brad Show Live to discuss the film and her work. Welcome, Chelsea. Thanks for coming on. But before we get into our conversation, let's just watch a trailer from Building the American Dream.
Cuando nos venimos de México tenemos un sueño. Iba a ser algo bueno, para un buen futuro.
Me metí a la escuela en El Salvador. Allí fue donde aprendí un poquito de electricidad. Nunca me imaginé que no me iban a pagar.
Randy se empezó a estar malo desde las 10 de la mañana y él le dijo que se sentía mal y nunca le decía deja de trabajar o no, él nomás le decía, lo corría para un lado.
I'm the sister of a fallen construction worker. You have the power to protect the workers who built this city.
Es hora de pedir justicia y que digamos un hasta aquí, no más muertes.
These are folks who work 10 hours doing the hardest job you can possibly do, and they're not afforded the basic rights of water.
Construimos la ciudad de nuestra posibilidad. Beneficios merecemos y pagados nos iremos.
Nosotros estamos peleando por todos, sin importar si es legal o es ilegal, de la nacionalidad que sea.
So the statistic in the trailer that a construction worker is killed on the job in Texas every 2.5 days is just absolutely astounding. I don't think people understand how many people die building America.
Yeah, I mean, it was shocking to me. I had no idea. I live in Austin, Texas. I was going to the university at the time, and there was a scaffold accident near campus, and 3 workers had fallen to their death when their scaffold collapsed, building a luxury condominium tower. And it was in the news, it was devastating, and it was just so close to where I was going to school that it really shocked me to know that people were actually getting hurt on the job. And Austin, like many giant cities around the country, has been booming for the past 15 years. I mean, there's 10 new buildings in the skyline that has entered over the decade. And so it really hit home to me, realizing that people were actually dying to build my hometown. And so I went to a rally, and I had some friends who were volunteering with an organization called Workers' Defense Project, and they were working on a study that would uncover this statistic, and it didn't come out until about a year after this accident. And that was when I was like, how does nobody know this? And we should all be outraged, especially in a town like Austin, which is very liberal. I was like, why is no one standing up trying to protect these workers and call for safer working conditions?
How long did it take you to make the movie?
When the idea came, I kind of put it in the back of my head. I filmed a little bit, and I thought, well, let me, get into the documentary industry. I need to, get some experience. And I did. And then another accident had happened. And I was like, okay, surely someone's out there developing this, or maybe it's already been made. And this was 2013. And I did some more research, and nobody had done anything about it. The New York Times had written an article about Texas construction, about the Workers' Defense Project. It was a huge article, and that I thought would totally get someone interested in making a film about this, and there was nothing. And so I thought, I'm here on the ground, I'm seeing what's happening. I have connections to workers and to this organization. I just need a film. So it did consume my life for a while. while.
So who do we meet in Building the American Dream?
We meet a Salvadorian couple, Claudia and Alex. They're electricians and they have 2 children, and they're just trying to make ends meet when they get robbed of their wages while doing all the electrical work on a grocery store in Dallas. So we follow them as they try to fight for their wages. It's about $11,000 that they are owed, as well as dealing with Claudia's immigration case, which she has an order of deportation, so she has to check in with ICE pretty regularly.
So it's a confluence of the immigrant situation, people getting deported, people coming from another country, people getting taken advantage of. So you have the immigration molded with worker safety.
Yeah, mainly also to show this link, like as much as a worker dies every 2.5 days, nearly half of the construction workforce in Texas is undocumented. And so it's questioning, like, why is there so much danger in the workplace? And it's really because you have immigrants being taken advantage of. They're disposable. And so, of course, we're going to see people die, people get hurt on the job.
What type of research goes into making a film like this?
The Workers' Defense Project is the only organization in the state that was fighting for construction workers, specifically undocumented and immigrant workers. And so my access to them was really incredible. And they were the only people doing this sort of research. I mean, unions hadn't even had these numbers. The fact that a worker dies every 2.5 days in Texas, like unions had no idea about that statistic until Workers' Defense Project got the funding to do a study to uncover those numbers.
Unions, who are supposed to be protecting the worker, doesn't know anything about this.
I think, they've got so much to deal with and they don't have the resources to conduct a really intensive study on the workplace.
So Building the American Dream, it was released in 2019. Have there been any updates on the families that you profiled in the film? For example, we talked about Claudia. She was facing an order of deportation. She was owed $11,000. How's it going for her now?
They got a little bit of money, and we see that in the film, but it was really only about $420, and they doubt that they'll get their money back, to be honest. However, what has happened from that is their employer actually threatened their lives, and their attorney recognized that a death threat from an employer was something that they could take to court. So they were able to apply for a U visa, both of them. However, that was a few years ago, so they're still pending. But she was checking in at ICE every 3 months, and now she doesn't have to check in for another 2 years. That was a great victory for her.
Tell us about the Granillo family that you featured in the film.
So the Granillo family, their son was undocumented, and he was working in the industry in residential construction. And in Texas, there's no state law that requires employers to give their workers a rest break. And Roindy Granillo, the son, he was about 25 years old, was ill on the construction site and asked his boss for a rest break. His boss denied him a break and told him he needed to continue working. And this was in 100-degree temperatures right outside of Dallas, Texas. And he collapsed. And there's a 911 call in the movie, which is a woman across the street who called 911 because his boss and his coworkers went over to tell her to call, and then they left. So he was left in this house unconscious and later died. And so the Granillo family teamed up with the Workers' Defense Project and other worker organizations like the AFL-CIO and fought for a rest break law in Dallas. And they ended up winning, but it wasn't without a fight. There's some strong words from some city council members that are against a rest break.
Christian Otavo, he lost his dad in a roofing accident. He then became a building inspector after his dad died because he wanted to prevent accidents from happening. How is he doing these days?
Christian's doing okay. He's working in carpentry and he's an independent contractor. He realizes what a safe workplace looks like and he understands his rights. So he knows if he's put in a precarious situation, he knows how to come forward.
What are some of the common misconceptions you found that people have regarding construction site safety?
I think people wonder why workers continue to work when they're not getting paid, not realizing that the majority of them are undocumented workers. These employers keep promising that they'll get paid, but it doesn't happen. And in Claudia and Alex's case, that was an extreme situation of really what happened.
In New York City, at least, whether you are legal or out of status, if you don't get paid, you can sue your employer.
There was a federal courthouse being built here in Austin, and there were 6 American citizens who weren't getting paid, and they had to go to the organization to fight for what they were owed.
The Hollywood Reporter, they wrote that building the American dream is an eye-opener about the abuse of workers whose immigration status makes them victims. What were some of your most shocking discoveries about the construction industry and undocumented workers in Texas?
Just the exorbitant amount of workers getting hurt on the job. We had another worker we had filmed who had stepped on a nail, and his employer told him to keep working. He thought, the pain would go away. And a few days later, his foot was so swollen that the employer told another worker, take him to the hospital because I don't want him to die here. He had to get 5 of his toes amputated.
In New York, there is strict liability. If you get injured on a work site because either the employer did not follow proper safety protocol, didn't give you a proper safety device, or because you fall or something falls on you. First thing you should always do is stay exactly where you are. Don't get driven to the hospital. Don't have your employer drive you to the hospital. Because as soon as that happens, employer says, this person didn't get hurt here, and you're an undocumented alien, and you're concerned about bringing litigation, and now there's a question of whether you were even working on that work site because you're getting paid off the books. There's no payroll records for you. So if you get injured, you stay exactly where you are. Everybody has a cell phone. You call 911 for 2 reasons. Number one, it's the quickest way to the hospital is with an ambulance.
Yeah.
Quicker than your employer driving you. And number 2, an ambulance picking you up where you got injured in a construction site documents you were injured on a construction site. And they have safety inspectors on the job site. The safety inspectors, they make pretend they're your friend, but they are not your friend. The safety inspectors are employed by the insurance companies to try to get information from you so that they can say they're not responsible for the accident. They come to interview you, they come to be your friend, but they're really not your friend. So really, if you get hurt, don't talk to anyone but your doctor and your lawyer. Okay?
That's great advice.
And lastly, take a lot of pictures, because by their own design, construction sites change every day because things are getting built. Does Texas require companies to have workers' compensation insurance?
No, Texas is the only state that workers' compensation is not required for contractors.
As a worker in New York, if you get injured, your medical bills get paid through workers' compensation, and you have strict liability to sue for your pain and suffering the owner of the property. But that's not how it works in Texas.
No.
Can you tell us how it works in Texas?
There are employers who are trying to do good out there. I don't want to vilify the entire industry, but there are companies who do provide workman's comp and liability, and they are proud to provide that. But then you start getting into the subcontractors, right? And that sub's hiring another sub who's hiring another sub, and things get lost down the line. And then that's where we see a lot of accidents happening because they don't have liability or they're not providing workman's compensation, and just, getting guys off the street. And honestly, here in Texas, there's a shortage of workers. I mean, in 2017, right before Hurricane Harvey hit, there was a 20,000 worker shortage in Houston alone. It's no big deal to have a worker get hurt on the job. They'll dump them off at the hospital and pick up some new people because people are looking for work and they've got plenty of jobs to fill.
Tell me a little bit about your immigration background.
Well, so I'm a 4th generation Texan, Mexican American. My family's been here for a long time. And so I've sort of, assimilated into the Texan ways. I grew up here in Texas, born in San Antonio, but I have a lot of friends who are my age who are 1st generation Mexicans, and, seeing their parents fight and work really hard so that they can get an education. There's a lot of universal elements there of just parents trying to give their children a good life. And I think that's what also kind of drew me to the story, is seeing these immigrants, just put food on their table, provide the best childhood that they can for their kids.
So where can people watch Building the American Dream? Maybe Joe Biden will watch it and change the laws. You never know.
Yeah, we are working on that, because even though new administration is coming in, these issues with worker safety have been happening for a very long time. And so right now, we just wrapped up streaming on PBS, but we are about to announce an educational distributor, and we'll be able to be available for streaming in universities and libraries, and also be working on having community screenings, all in the virtual space.
There's a website for buildingtheamericandream.com. What do you have on buildingtheamericandream.com?
So if you go to our website, we've got a resources tab. You can get information for worker safety and know your rights information in the construction field for different states, including Texas. We've also added some COVID-19 resources on how to keep you and your employers safe, and it is bilingual.
Great. What is your American dream?
I feel like I'm living a little bit of it right now. I had always wanted to be in media. I had a kids show when I was 8 years old, like a little Martha Stewart show, but for kids that was on the local channels in Austin. I've always been intrigued by journalism and documentary film, and I just hope I can continue making films for the rest of my life. Building the American Dream, she exposed the underbelly of the Texas construction industry, exploiting undocumented immigrants. Certainly eye-opening, and thank you very much for coming on. Great job, and wow, what a labor of love to do that over a decade. Congratulations to you. Thank you. Thanks, Brad.